Hi, welcome to the second part of a talk I would have given to the Ulster Archaeological Society, but for the coronavirus lockdown. I'll continue to look at how we can use material culture to interpret late prehistoric societies, focusing particularly on the pointy metal stuff: daggers, dirks, rapiers, swords, and axes. It's generally assumed that these were the quintessential weapons of a dominant male warrior elite. This is a very persistent assumption that we examined in the first part of these talks. Daggers and axes certainly had a special significance and appear in some very special places. We also looked at how warriors have been depicted over the years, with subtexts offering possible explanations for any paucity of osteological and weapon damage, and the discovery of large quantities of Bronze Age material in wet places. But the evidence from actual Bronze Age points convincingly towards ragtag civilian militias with improvised weapons rather than any elite sword-wielding warrior class. However, other studies of Irish long-bladed weapons have drawn different conclusions, and in one case, signs of use by skilled combatants were noted on more than half of a 65-piece sample. These blades were included in my more recent study of several hundred European Bronze Age weapons. For each piece, the presence of 4 basic edge damage types, along with rivet hole and tip damage, was recorded using a standard grid. When damage location and frequency was plotted, comparison of blade types and geographic regions produced 2 unexpected results. Despite the general assumption that rapiers were used exclusively as thrusting weapons, while only swords would have been used for both thrusting and slashing, rapiers appear to have been used extensively as slashing weapons, and nowhere more so than Ireland. These assumptions about function were largely due to the different mechanisms of attachment used with these blades. For rapiers, the lack of a tang was clearly an inherent weakness. Although in this case, rather than combat damage, the handle appears to have been hacked off prior to deposition in the River Bann. I saw no damage that I could confidently attribute to prehistoric combat. There is, however, broad agreement on the absence of damage, and that due to what might be described as natural causes, mainly corrosion. But there is substantial disagreement on the extent of damage due to ritual and modern treatment. We look first at modern damage, usually the easiest to identify. Use-wear analysis of 2 Irish Middle Bronze Age rapiers provides key evidence for prehistoric weapons being used by skilled martial art practitioners. However, closer examination reveals that all the identified edge damage has an associated loss of patina, which can only mean that it happened after the recovery of these blades. If there is one golden rule for use-wear analysis, it's that patina damage is modern damage. There are 5 more indicators which can help distinguish ancient and modern treatment. Although unusual and a particularly Irish phenomenon, examples of Bronze Age swords reworked to accept modern handles can be found, and a few survive with these still in place. Occasionally with handle replacement and blade repair. Perhaps the most famous example of a Bronze Age sword fitted with a modern handle is now on display in the Royal Ontario Museum in Canada. Its surviving sales receipt states that it was taken at New Ross, County Wexford, Ireland, in the Rebellion of 1798. When conservators removed the modern hide handle, they revealed an ancient repair to the tang. This was a very common procedure for Irish late Bronze Age swords. Contemporary accounts describe how, at the outbreak of the 1798 rebellion, the homes of tenant farmers and landed gentry alike were plundered for food and arms. Even the palaces of bishops were not immune. This blade was rejoined, possibly by a collector, using modern tin lead solder, which forms a relatively weak joint in bronze. It was nevertheless strong enough to withstand the force of several patina-shattering blows. This soldered blade withstood similar abuse, but not for long. A soldered single-finger joint provides a stronger repair for this blade, which also shows signs of modern use forward of the joint. Any aesthetic considerations were abandoned when this blade was rejoined using solder and a tin plate collar. The result was, nevertheless, a recommissioned weapon. The messy brazed repair on this blade would still be considerably stronger than a tin lead solder joint. Patina damage forward of the break confirms that it and the repair are modern. Another example of a modern brazed repair and subsequent modern damage. Probably during its repair, this blade tip was hammered to a crude chisel point. Contemporary accounts confirm the suspected refurbishment and reuse of plundered weapons. However, the most obvious use for any short Bronze Age blade taken from a cabinet of curiosities would be as a pike, the Irish rebels' weapon of choice. And in the spring of 1798, these were being produced in huge numbers. And it's not so difficult to imagine that some of these were tipped with ready-made blades looted from some antiquarian collection. As appears to have been the case with this dirk, now fitted with an iron socket. A handwritten note in its records states that it was probably reused in 1798. So, having considered the nature and extent of modern damage, we can now concentrate on ritual damage. And by ritual damage, I mean deliberate destruction that occurred at the time of deposition. Butt damage can be seen on an early Bronze Age halberd blade, where the intention appears to have been to hack away a wooden handle prior to deposition. Damage to the blade edge has a similar dull profile and is also covered by ancient patina. While this Middle Bronze Age blade also appears to have had its organic handle hacked off at the time of its deposition, modern damage is evident on the cutting edge. Hacking damage can be seen around the rivet hole of this blade, while both the butt and surviving rivet on this Middle Bronze Age blade from the River Shannon carry U-shaped notches. Similar in profile and location to those on a Middle Bronze Age blade from the River Thames. The butt on this blade was completely shattered and an axe-like implement used to batter the blade in at least 2 locations before it too was bent to breaking point. Another blade suffered a similar fate, and while tools such as chisels might have been used to inflict some of this damage, there is evidence to suggest that even the most prestigious axes might have been used against other metallic edges. Crossblade damage around the repaired break on a blade we looked at earlier appears to have been inflicted at the time of its deposition by blows from a heavy, dull-edged object, perhaps a blunt axe. Similar damage can be seen on another blade we looked at earlier, with cross-blade hacking at the point of breakage and, more clearly, further down towards the butt. Close inspection of blades that were presumably never intended for use reveals that these two might have sustained damage to both blade and butt. It was clearly the butt rather than the non-existent handle of these blades that was the target, and the intention was to bend them rather than break the blade. And these weapons weren't being put beyond use, as they were never actually in use. The pattern of patina loss suggests that another blade we looked at earlier was also bent but not broken, and then straightened after recovery. However, a Middle Bronze Age rapier from the Thames demonstrate how a kink will likely remain, which might only be removed by hammering, which risks breaking the blade. With no remaining patina, it's not clear when this late Bronze Age sword was broken, but it also has deep U-shaped notches associated with the breaks. This damage was inflicted after an abandoned attempt to repair the tang by casting on a new end. The tang of this Middle Bronze Age sword from the River Thames was rejoined more successfully using the same technique. So, might we ever detect irrefutable ancient combat damage on Irish Middle Bronze Age blades? Probably not. The evidence points strongly to modern and ritual causes, further undermining the ubiquity of male warrior elites at this time. In part 3, we look at pots and patterns, and particularly the decoration on some of the blades we've looked at, and consider the wider application of these motifs and their possible symbolic significance. Is it possible that this restricted palette of seemingly abstract decorative motifs might have meaning? And offer insights into the belief systems of some of the earliest inhabitants of Ireland.